This will be the final part. God. Oh my goodness. All right, I'm back. Anybody else there? Oh, let's put a little music in the background while I wait for folks to come back. So, well, it's just me once again. This will now be part 5 of this live stream, and this will be the end of it. I'm not gonna keep doing it. I'll get some folks back here so I can wrap up final thoughts. I don't want to close without having a chance to say so long to folks. So right now, people are probably just trying to figure out who's here and how to get across and join me here. I'm by myself at the moment. This is a live stream, which I call Stray Voltage, here on the 20th of April, 2020. And we've been talking about random events and news in South Africa and here in the US and things as they relate to COVID-19 around the planet. That's the Wuhan coronavirus, also known as COVID-19 by its scientific name. So while I sit here and what will be part 5 of a stream, hopefully some folks will join me again, but maybe they won't. I'll give it a couple more moments here, maybe a minute or two, and see if folks join the stream. I hope they do, so we can wrap up. But right now, I seem to be here all by myself. So let me go see if this is actually even streaming on YouTube at the moment. It looks like it is. It says upcoming. Am I live streaming? Yeah, I'm live streaming according to that, all by my lonesome. Anyway, yikes. All right, well, the music's great, so we can listen to music for a little bit. But today I've been talking about a number of different topics, including the theft of or misuse of food parcels meant for the poor in South Africa during this COVID-19 lockdown by government officials, specifically local ward councilors around the country. Also talked a bit about the Red Ants, which is a private security firm. There's Just a Ghost. Somebody's back. Yeah, so I'm playing some background music here so that people come back and won't be too bored with this, Just a Ghost. Yeah, so talked about the Red Ants a little bit here, a private security firm that has been evicting residents in the southwest corner of Johannesburg illegally. The eviction of residents and is not permitted under the current COVID-19 restrictions lockdown. The Justice Minister has made it not something that can be done. Nonetheless, it happened over the past few days, and residents have been protesting for 3 days as they're angry about what's happened. So there you have it. We were talking before we rudely got cut off by YouTube servers for the 4th time, making this part 5. I see folks are coming back in now. So before we were rudely cut off, we were talking about the theft of parcels. So what I'm going to do, folks, as we get a few more folks back in here, I'm going to turn off the African music in the background, which I was using to hopefully entertain folks. So it didn't just disappear. I'm going to wrap up this this discussion about the food parcels here, and then I'll listen to any more questions anybody might have. I'm enjoying the stream. I hope you are too. And I'll stay longer if you want to. It's not like I've got any pressing, urgent business to go out and take care of, and there's certainly a lot for us to talk about. But I know it's getting frustrating with the watching the stream ends. Trust me, I got to go back and edit all this nonsense, and I don't even understand YouTube's editing function. So I'm just going to have to make it part 1 through 5 at this point, unless we get cut off again. But back to the food parcels. Let me go ahead and go through those again very quickly here. It looks like we got some folks back now. Let me get back to the chat here. Hooray, not Navy. What's with the Navy? All right, okay, tapping your toes. I guess you like the music. Okay, so here we go. All right, so I was talking about, what was it called? Is it KZN or no? What was the last place? Yeah, it wasn't at the top. Okay, so so Edwin Mkhize, the provincial secretary of Kasatu, had told City Press that he was concerned. And he said, it has been said that in every, oh, I already said that, sorry. A little behind here. Let's jump on here. Okay, so activist Mary DeHaas has said she received information from different parts of the province about counselors handing out food parcels meant for the poor to their families, friends, and allies, and are excluding other hungry people who are not in the category. Okay, I do appreciate that reporting. I appreciate the folks turning to the press and telling them about these things. But unless we have evidence of it, some of this is just anecdotal. Again, I'm not surprised it's happening, but what needs to happen is that there needs to be investigation by competent authorities and the South African Police Service into these incidents and serious attention paid to it. You know, people are suffering right now, and it is not the time for self-absorbed politicians to take advantage of South Africans. There's plenty of time for that at other times, certainly not during this crisis. All right, let's see what else here. So Here we go. So Vuzi Zweni, chairperson of the hostel movement, Ubunye Bama Hostela. Oh, I like that. Ubunye Bama Hostela from hostels. Said this lockdown has people worried. They're hungry. Well, I don't have the figures. There's a high prevalence of HIV and AIDS and TB among the hostel dwellers. You can see it. These people need food to take their medication. We as an organization are doing what we can. We provide items to local hostel leaders who then distribute them to the most vulnerable. Items such as maize, cooking oil, and rice, small things to help them through. Well, that's absolutely a very vital point that's mentioned here. One of the things about antiretrovirals that people lose sight of is that when you have HIV, managing this chronic infection is not simply getting enough sleep or eating properly and monitoring your CD4 levels and taking medication when your CD4 levels drop below the World Health Organization or UN AIDS recommended level for it, which fluctuates. One time it's 400, one time it's 300, one time it's 200, back and forth for CD4 levels. Hard to keep up with them. Anyway, I think it has a lot to do with resources. They simply lower it and put people more at risk, but that's just a personal view. If you're HIV positive, everything in your life has an impact on what's going on. You have to manage what's going on. You have to eat properly. You have to sleep properly. If you don't eat properly, your body gets worn down. When your body wears down, you become more susceptible to the virus awakening and taking advantage, or if it's already awake, taking advantage of your immune system unable to respond. And so anyone who is responsible for the care and treatment of HIV positive persons in South Africa ought to have had a plan, or by now developed a plan on how we ensure that those people, particularly the poor, have access to nutrition and they're getting it and they're maintaining it. Otherwise, you're going to see a spike in people, not only because of hunger, but because of hunger causing opportunistic infections and weakening people's immune systems. You're going to see horrific number of deaths. Now, none of those deaths are going to be attributed to COVID-19 because those people aren't being tested for COVID-19 and they may not even have COVID-19, but they could very easily die as a consequence of being unable to earn money so that they can feed themselves and their families. It's why these issues are not so simple. They're very complicated, and governments that have disgusting people who steal from the public or use their public position to advantage at the expense of others should really be taken out. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to use the words I'd like to use there, and I'm not going to advocate for any violence. But what I'm saying is they certainly should be removed from their positions. So let's see what else. We're trying to hear our lesson on the SANDF. Okay. I got Nicholas and you all ears. Okay. Is this not the time for the SJW to come out and do so? SJW? What's SJW, Just a Ghost? Am I missing something there? That doesn't sound familiar. I don't know what SJW is. Maybe I do, and I just don't recognize the three letters like that, so I'll have to wait and see what you say there. Interesting. Yeah, let's see what else. So we've talked about the red ants. We've talked about HIV and tuberculosis now. Yeah, and South Africa has 7.7 million that we know of HIV positive citizens. It's the largest number in the world, even more than India, a country multiple times larger than South Africa. And it has 660,000 people who have tuberculosis. And you have somewhere in the order of 260,000 people who have co-infection between HIV and tuberculosis. And those people are very much at risk by what's going on here. So what do we got here? Old school mate's a captain, says it's not the same. Ill discipline, not fully trained, cocked up telecom, and an honorary brigadier. Yep. Say it as it is. Yep. Social justice warriors. Yeah. No. It's really unfortunate when government uses its position to affect change that's not in the interest of everyone. Appointing people who are not qualified to something is not in the interest of anyone. I understand where people make the argument, and there's certainly a time in history when certain things had to be done. So if you go back to the early days of the SANDF, you had a large number of people came in from the Bantustan's forces or from the liberation guerrilla movements who were advanced to major or lieutenant colonel very quickly or came in with those ranks. Understandable in some respects. You needed to have the leadership of the military not be exclusively from the old SADF if you wanted to have integration and reconciliation. Understandable. And some of the early picks were actually good. If you look at the South African Navy, the first black South African chief of the Navy, Modimo, I think it was an excellent selection. He had no Navy experience, but you know what? I'm a person whose opinion that you don't have to have experience in some specific area when you're leading at a senior level. So he came in and was the head of the South African Navy, and in my view, arguably did a pretty darn good job with the Navy. Now, the fact that he'd been in MK and had never led a Navy, that's understandable. MK didn't have a Navy of any sort, but he was put in a leadership position. His job is to lead a large organization, and so he can surround himself with competent, qualified former South African Navy officers, well, serving at the time, but South African Navy officers who've been in the SADF, in the SANDF now, and he can succeed. It's kind of like Lou Gerstner when he took over IBM back in the early 1990s. He had no previous experience running an IT company. His experience had been in the business world at American Express under Ken Chenault, and then also, or it was before Ken Chenault. Anyway, but he'd been American Express, been a VP there, been very successful, and then he was at RJR Nabisco, and he was very successful at RJR Nabisco. So he comes to IBM, and he's hired to save IBM, and the IT world says, well, this guy doesn't know anything about computers. Why are you hiring a guy who knows nothing about computers? Well, as the case of Lou Gerstner points out, in my view, you don't have to be a subject matter expert when you're leading. You just have to be a competent and successful leader who can build functioning teams. If you don't know the topic like an expert, you can still be successful. And Lou Gerstner is a fine example of that. And you can do the same thing in the SANDF. You can bring someone in who doesn't have the experience in that particular affectation, but they can be successful. They can be successful if they're good leaders or great leaders. And that's just the way things work in my view. If you innately know how to lead, you can succeed. I mean, although I have issues with his ego and his constant self-promotion, look at Richard Branson. Richard Branson has ventured into all sorts of business ventures, from Coca-Cola to records, of course, airlines, which is where he got started. But arguably, Virgin is not the most successful or even the best airline or the most value for your money, Virgin Atlantic or his other Virgin operations. But he's been successful. And why is that? Because he knows how to lead. He knows how to convince and get people to do things to be successful. He knows how to run things. And he's had failures. There's no Virgin Cola around that I can recall. We're not getting that anymore. But Richard Branson is an exceptional leader who's done very well throughout his business career. And is an example of a person who doesn't have experience in a particular field, but can still take his leadership traits and try success in a field. See how it happens. MK Navy, 4 yachts on Lake Tanganyika. It sounds like the Schutztruppe during the First World War under Colonel Paul Lettow von Vorbeck in Tanganyika. Germans had a boat out on the lake, and it engaged in a naval battle with British ships that came out there. Interesting story. Agreed. Leadership is leadership. The higher up you go, the more people met. Exactly. Yeah, not technical. Yeah, Nicholas, absolutely right. So, when you're at the lower level, if you're running a team that's installing applications for a business, you need to understand that. If you're that young leader or that junior leader who's leading a team to go in and set up the IT network and the email system for a business that you've been contracted to provide services for, you need to understand this stuff. You can't just be showing up and going, all right, guys, go ahead and set up those server things over there, and I'll be sitting over here, and come see me when you've got a problem while I drink my Starbucks. It's good to be the king. No, it doesn't work that way. At the lower levels, I agree with you, Nicholas, you have to have the ability to understand the technical areas. So you have to know that. So for instance, when I was a young intelligence officer, I had to understand the Soviet threat, or my credibility as intelligence officer would have been shot and I would have been unsuccessful. But as I moved up the ranks, my experience leading and understanding broader, larger, beyond tactical to the operational to the strategic level came into play. That doesn't mean that someone that's young can't be a strategic leader. We've seen very successful people at a young age on occasion rise. My point I'm just making here is that in most endeavors in life, as Nicholas was getting at, the lower the level you are, closer to the tactical level, the more of the technical expertise you need to have in the field you're working. I would agree with that. So let's see, Francois Joubert. Sorry for the French pronunciation. I realize you're Afrikaans most likely, but it is of French origin, French Huguenot origin, so Francois Joubert. I do speak French. Maybe Richard can save SAA. Richard's got an ego, but I don't think his ego is big enough to take on saving SAA. My advice to SAA is liquidation, disbandment, sell off the assets, pay the debts, return the leased aircraft that you have, if any of the 45 aircraft are leased, I think a couple are, and start over. In the meantime, Comair, through its Comair British Airlines franchisee role, and Kulula, through its discount airline, are going to grow their market, assuming they survive the lockdown, and I think they can. Assuming they survive the lockdown, they are going to pick up market share from what was SAA. And if the government wants a national carrier again, then they want to take that foolish path. That's on them. But I think that from the rump, surviving pieces of the carcass of South African Airlines, that the company can be resurrected, but it needs a different strategy. Now, I did a video on here. If you look on my channel, check sometime, South African Airlines saving this mess or something like that, where I gave 5 recommendations before it became obvious that it was all over. When the government was still bailing them out, I gave 5 recommendations on how to do it, and that included privatization. Well, there's not going to be anything left to privatize now, so liquidate it and then sell the rump off to someone who's willing to invest and bring the airline back, but a private investor, not the state. That's kind of my view. SAA was too expensive, and it's also full of a lot of lazy and incompetent people. Now, I know the 4,700 people who are working at SAA. I'm not offending you. That's not my intent. But those of you who work there, we all know that you can find one of your colleagues, 2, 3, 4, 5, who don't do their job or do it very effectively. There are hardworking people at SAA, including pilots, ground crew, flight attendants, booking agents, executives. But the airline is also full of a lot of dead weight, and that's part of the problem. So you got to get rid of the dead weight. All right, so Paulie7 Fires says, would like to hear your theory on leadership in times of crisis, both combat in times like this, approaches and ways to execute those ideas. Wow, that's a pretty big topic there. Okay, so let me do this, folks. This is what we're going to do, okay? Since I got like a dozen or so people watching the stream right now, if we get cut off again by the YouTube server incompetence, communications incompetence, or YouTube censors, whatever's going on today, seems to be global. If we get cut off again, I won't come back on with the stream. I'm going to end it if we get cut off again. But in the meantime, while we're on, I'm going to keep going. So this is a tough one. Let me get to Nicholas's point, and then I'll get back to Paulie. So you saw the SAV, agree the $10 billion liquidation. I'll take more. Yeah, I'll take more than $10 billion. The $10 billion that SAA was asking for was just to keep it in operations. And in operations, they're only flying contract charter flights to repatriate South Africans. And there's only so many South Africans living abroad who need to come home. So that's not going to last very long. And the other part is their cargo services are there. But Comair has better cargo services, and they're not the only ones. Another airline that offers cargo service in South Africa. So they're not going to survive on that alone. And so that money was just to keep them afloat for an indeterminate period of time, at least till April. Well, now we're through April. So yeah, $10 billion is not going to save South Africa. And its structure is, its framework is not appropriate for the market. And this is really sad because South African Airlines survived apartheid. When they were banned from landing all over Africa, with the exception of the Canary Islands, because it was part of Portugal, when they couldn't land all over Africa and they had to land there to get to Europe and go to the United States, they had unfair, unwarranted costs that were part of their operations because they had to pay for all this extra fuel and extra hours on aircraft. They didn't have to fly because they had to fly around Africa instead of across it. And it was a real problem for them. But they remained in operation and they remained profitable for much of their history. But the sad part now is that they're going to go out of business, and it's just a shame that that it happened. At the end of apartheid, when African governments let the ANC government and the new South Africa do business in Africa, SAA should have been primed and should have, even if they didn't have a plan in '94, by 2000 should have had a plan to expand across Africa, to brand their product, to be the airline that flew to Abuja, to Lagos, to Addis, to Nairobi. And yes, they fly those places, but they should have been picking up market share. What happened? Ethiopian Airlines grew. Even Kenya Airways grew. Brussels Airlines expanded the network. Now, Brussels Airlines is the third incarnation of bankrupt companies, one that became profitable and now belongs to the Lufthansa Group. But Brussels Airlines expanded all over West Africa and all over Central Africa. And those three, and now Turkish Airlines is in the African market. And what did South Africa do? Very little, because they were fat, dumb, and happy and didn't have the resources because of a lot of reasons: patronage, poor investment decisions, things like that. In the meantime, Comair created Kulula on the model of Southwest Airlines, flying exclusively 737s. Now they have almost all 737-800s, I believe, and they have 10 aircraft, 9 of which are 737-800s. It's profitable, and so is Comair, which has been in business since 1943, if I'm not mistaken. So while South African floundered and didn't build that network, Kulula built a domestic network on the order of the similarity to Southwest Airlines here in the U.S., And Comair continued its network in South Africa, and it also has business in neighboring states. But anyway, South African Airlines. So sad, so sad. All right, back to the leadership. Well, Paulie, gosh, that's a tough thing to answer. My theory on leadership. I don't know if I've ever really formulated a theory on leadership. I think the thing about leadership is you obviously have to have a lot of people talk about whether leaders are naturally born or you can develop them. I think you can develop a leader, but there are definitely some, I don't know if they're natural, but there's certainly learned behaviors that make someone more suited to be a natural leader. You can take someone who has certain traits and you have to have, now there's different approaches. I mean, you can have a leader who doesn't have much empathy for people and he can be abusive at times. I mean, look at Donald Trump. He has empathy for people, but when someone wrongs him, there's no empathy there and he goes after them with both guns blazing. When people wrong me, as a leader, I don't go after them with guns blazing. I will find a way to marginalize them and set them aside so they don't influence events if possible. But I don't go out of my way. So this is a difficult one to answer, but I would say that a great leader, in my view, if I look at my theory on it, you have to have the ability to empathize. You have to be able to put yourself in the shoes and the shoes of someone else. And the reason for that is that, so for instance, when COVID-19 lockdown came along, if you watch my videos and you listen to my commentary or you read my comments on LinkedIn, what was one of the first things I talked about? Well, one of the first things I talked about wasn't small businesses and individuals and jobs. I did talk about that. But in the African context, going back to March, when people started these lockdowns, I was talking up front about the informal sector. Why? Because I've lived all over Africa and I understand that in much of the continent, as much as 80% of the workforce is employed, the employed workforce is in the informal sector. People live off the informal sector. They need it. They have to have it. And my concern, I put myself in the shoes as best I could of a guy wiping down windscreens in Santon, trying to get a few rand, or the lady who's working in an informal settlement north of Pretoria, plaiting hair, making a few rand from that, or someone doing nails, or someone selling their wares on the street in a market in Monrovia. So I try to put myself in the shoes of those people and realize that most of those people barely make enough money to survive on for themselves and or their families from day to day. When you stop them from moving, that income disappears. What's going to happen to them? So my point is that from a leader's standpoint, I think empathy is important. You don't have to feel morose about the world, but you do have to understand people. And so for me personally, whenever I start to get a big head, and let's be honest, we all get a big head at times and our egos get a little inflated, and I will confess that on occasion. But usually for me, it's in a joking fashion, honestly. When I'm acting as if I'm a know-it-all or I have all the answers, usually I'm doing it in jest, and that's the truth. That's the honest truth. But for me, whenever I start to think that my britches are too big for me, I always remember that in 1985, I was a private first class on a winter reforger, and that's an acronym for Return of Forces to Germany. There were huge exercises the U.S. military would conduct in Germany back during the Cold War in what would be a play out of what would happen if we had to deploy to defend Europe and the Soviets came across the Warsaw Pact. So the Reforger was the major exercise. So I went on a Reforger in January, I think it was January 1985, in the dead of winter in Germany. And I was in a communications unit, and my job was to go to a remote hilltop and put in a signal receiving at one end and transmitting out another antenna to the other end to lengthen the distance that we could communicate. There were no mobile phones. There were no sat phones that we had available. That was only for a very few people on the planet back then. So the military relied on these communication links. And from one end, someone would pick up a telephone in the field, a general or a colonel, and talk to someone. It would go through the lines on the ground and would go out to a machine and would go into a radio van and it would go out through a radio signal to a far location, reach my signal on a remote hilltop that's blocking the line of sight, and I would receive it and then retransmit out the other side, essentially. And so that's what I did. But on the way to the exercise, my steering gearbox in my piece of crap Dodge pickup truck that the government had bought to save Chrysler in its first effort to save Chrysler in the late 1970s, I'm driving up a hill and I went to turn left. And well, that looks like right for you guys, so I'll go this way. So I went to turn left and the truck kept going straight because the steering gearbox snapped inside. So I was spinning the wheel and I was going straight. Fortunately, it was up a hill and it was into a driveway instead of a wall, which was close by. If I had already started to turn, I would have had an accident. So I was able to stop safely in a church parking lot. But the consequence is I spent 12 hours sitting in this little village freezing, occasionally starting the truck so I didn't get frostbite, waiting for a contact team to come and do repairs on my vehicle with mechanics. And they couldn't repair it on the site because they didn't have the part. So what they did is they towed us to the site. Instead of going to my hill, an alternate backup vehicle had gone to that hill, and now I was the alternate. So I was taken to a site with the squad leaders and platoon leaders, and I stayed there. And I didn't have a communications shot initially, so I was superfluous. I was extra. So what happened to me is I wound up pulling a lot of guard duty. And I pulled 2-hour shifts because of the temperature. But I went out, and this is before we had the Kevlar helmets, the ones that look like what the Nazis had in the Second World War, the Wehrmacht. I had a steel pot, which was just the old steel one you remember from Vietnam and World War II, which wasn't much in the way of ballistic protection. And so my steel pot was quite cold. The Kevlar, by contrast, is made of plastic material, so it isn't nearly as cold as having steel on your head, which gets very cold. So I had that, and I wore what we call a pile cap around my face, and it wrapped around here. And I had some gloves on, but I was constantly had to put my hands like this. Of course, I have a weapon, and I'm wearing full military gear, walking, standing on the road there, freezing. And I wore what we call Mickey Mouse boots. These are inflatable boots that are made of rubber. You slide your feet in them, and the heat stays in there, and you sweat, and you stay warm. So my feet were never cold. Never had any risk of getting frostbite there because the heat was trapped there. But my hands and my ears and my face were freezing. 2-hour guard shift, I spent 14 hours there. Now, why did I tell you the story? I tell you the story because whenever I start to think I'm too important or I get too big for my britches, I think back to January Reforger in 1985 when I was so unimportant to the people who were responsible for my well-being in uniform, left me out there for 14 hours in the freezing cold. Now, we have what are called general orders, and one of our general orders is we don't abandon our posts unless properly relieved. So I never left. Quite frankly, people are like, you're crazy. All you had to do was walk, a kilometer and say, hey, how come no one relieved me? They put me out there without a radio, without any means of communication, and no one came by the road. 14 hours. So when you get too big for your britches, it's always nice to have something to remind you that we're all human. We all come into this world the same way, unless some come cesarean, some come natural. We essentially come into the world the same way, and we leave in the same fashion. We pass from the planet in the same fashion. Different ways of passing, but we all pass eventually. So I think that plays a role in what makes a great leader. If you have that understanding, and I don't want to say humility, because you don't have to have humility to be a great leader. I think you can have arrogant great leaders. People have different approaches. So anyway, let's see what folks have got to say. Paulie, let me know if I answered your question. That's not a complete answer, but I don't really have a theory on leadership. I just have some precepts on it and some thoughts on it. Nicholas saw my essay video. Thank you. Yep. 15% competent. Yep. Bloated. Yep. SA is the first to go under. No, it's not. Francois Joubert. SA Express was the first to go. SA Express is already in liquidation. South African Airlines is not officially being liquidated yet, but SA Express is being liquidated as we speak. They were the first to file for to be taken out. SA was about a week behind them, but they're coming. ROT's always at the top. Qantas, 28 staff per aircraft. SA is something 950%. Yeah, 4,700 employees just in the airline, 45 aircraft. You do the math. Yep, that's insane. So if this blows up again, I'm off to Ronaldo. It stops again. Oh, Jessica goes, I thought Ronaldo wasn't coming back on. If I'm keeping people from Ronaldo, then my apologies. Bottle stores will open on Tuesday for a very limited time, to be exact, from when the alarm goes off until the alarm response vehicle. Okay. At least it's not an RTU. Thanks. Actually do motivate me. Great story, character building, topic. I'm sure you could do this on the side. Well, thanks, Paulie. That's very kind of you. Nicholas, feel your pain. Some think breakfast, 2 boiled eggs, used to stand attention. Yeah, the people that have not, listen, I'm not one of those people who think that everyone should serve in uniform. No, not at all. I'm very happy the United States has a volunteer force. I think it's a sound approach for a modern, advanced society to have a professional force, but it's incumbent on that force not to think that it's elite and to be disconnected from society. We have a role and a responsibility to stay connected to society that sometimes gets lost on some of those in uniform. Most of us know, but some. So as long as you don't feel you're elite, and as long as you are drawn from the ranks of society, and our military is drawn from across society, despite what some people will tell you, then I think that's okay, being an all-volunteer force. But I'm not one of these people that advocates that everybody should serve. There are some people like, well, you should have a draft. Everyone should serve in uniform. Everyone should go through the same thing. I don't think so. We all have different experiences in life, and the military serves a function if it's used properly in society, and that's to ensure the territorial sovereignty, the independence and freedom of a country, and defend it against all aggressors, foreign and domestic. So that's kind of where I sit on that. Let's see what else we got here. PCCs and PCIs, soldiers only do things that the boss checks. Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, I took care of my rig when I was enlisted, even though people didn't check stuff. You are more inclined to spend time and devote time to the things that do get checked because you want to pass the inspection and go home. But if you're a professional soldier, you do spend time taking care of all the things that you have to do. Yeah, absolutely. If there's time. Sometimes there isn't time. All right. So, so the SAA thing. Any other questions? And if no other questions, then maybe we should wrap it up before YouTube drops us again. Let me get your thoughts on that. You guys comment. You want me to stay and talk some more? If so, say yes, and then give me a topic you want to talk about. Because again, this is stray voltage. We're just talking off the cuff at this point, and I'm happy to talk about things. It's kind of nice to reminisce with those who served in uniform, but not everybody served in uniform, so maybe people want to talk about something else. What's your views on Operation Köselig? I'm not sure I know the operational name of that operation, Francois. What was that operation? If you could help me out. Most of my knowledge on what was happening, if this is during the apartheid era, is what happened in Southwest Africa or Namibia and Angola. And then some of the special ops things are taking place, but I don't know all the names of special ops. That's not the ANC attacking ANC in Habaroni, is it? I don't recognize this. I guess that's. Do you think Eric Prince, Evan Barlow, and other pieces should be? Oh no! I do not, Willem. I do not. I don't think that unlawful change of government is appropriate. No, not at all. Nope. An interesting story here. So in the United States, in order, I talk about not getting ahead of yourself or having a big ego and thinking you're important. Lots of talk about military industrial complex ever since the Eisenhower days, how the military runs government and influences things. That's, in my view, oftentimes overplayed and a lot of nonsense, honestly. So let me give you an example of how things really roll out. Now, I don't know the current situation because protocol changes. I've worked in embassies and I'm familiar with protocol, and it matters in government. It really does. But let me give you an example. So my former boss, when I was a lieutenant, had been a speechwriter for General Bernard Rogers. He was head of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Command Europe and Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE, and United States Army Europe. So he was in the European Command. I think he was commander. Anyway, General Bernard Rogers, very well-known four-star general back in the 1980s, and my boss had been his speechwriter. And so when they went to the White House for official functions at the White House, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is a senior military officer in the U.S. military, on the order of precedence, going down that list of things, where do you think they ranked? Number one, after the president. Number two, number three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Take a guess. I'll give you a chance to guess where the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at least at that time, I don't know the current protocol, but at that time in the 1980s, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff ranked number one to what in the order of precedence? All right, so let's see. The oil refining in Angola. No, I'm not that familiar with it, Francois. My apologies. I'll have to take a look and see. I do know about some attacks took place there, but let me see. What do you reckon the SA government do regards to opening the economy to a degree? SA is already in terrible shape. Okay. Right. So IC3ZA, one of my videos, I talked about this in the informal sector. I think that the government in South Africa, number one, should suspend BE instantly. It should be frozen right now. You should not have produced a BE certificate to provide services to the government, a government that desperately needs services. The government should allow any legitimate licensed company to operate in South Africa compete for contracts, and they should pick the winners of contracts to deliver services and goods, particularly in this moment in time, to those who are best capable of delivering the services, and stop the racist legislation. That's the first step. That will make a tremendous impact and have an impact on the economy. That's number one. Number two, the government should also allow certain sectors of the economy to reopen, places in which people do not have to be physically close to each other to do their business. So, for instance, anybody that has a warehousing business in which the only thing they have in there is people who are wholesalers delivering goods, and you have a handful of employees working in the warehouse, operating equipment, you can take plenty of safety measures to protect those people and let them get back to business. Now, some of those warehouses are open, but not all of them, and more should be deemed essential for the economy. Beyond that, the informal sector. Now, this is not a perfect solution, and it won't solve problems for everybody, because some people in the informal sector simply have to be near or touch people to affect their business. So, for instance, If you plait hair, if your job is to plait people's hair, you cannot do that at a distance. You have to have people who um, who come next to you, and so you come within distance, and so you put yourself at risk. So you can't help some people in the informal sector until things are in a better situation, better state. We know with the spread of COVID-19. But there are people who sell things in the informal sector, and they can do things. There's no reason whatsoever why the guys who wipe down windshields can't operate on the streets in Santon or in Joburg. The guys who are very annoying come out, and wipe down windows. Some of those folks, if not all, should be allowed to come out and do it. If people want to pay them a little bit of money for that, they can drop in a little bin. The guy can stand there with a little cup and with a stick on or something like that. There are things like that can be creative to allow people to get back in the informal sector, and it must be done. And you'll have to have, of course, people out that enforce social distancing, but I think that it really, really matters that we get back to this sort of thing. Beyond that, I think it's absolutely brain dead that if there are still export markets for South African goods that can be shipped with little risk to the public, like wine, then these things should continue to be shipped around the world. Take advantage of the market now while it's there. Some countries may wind up in lockdown for far longer. Fortunately, Ghana is lifting parts of its lockdown this week. I listened to the president on his live broadcast last night, but I caught it midstream because I was doing something else. So I didn't catch everything he said. So I have to go back and read some news reports, a summary of what he said. But I got the impression he was lifting parts of the lockdown for Accra, Kumasi, and some other places like Takoradi in Ghana. And I think that's helpful. Beyond that, in places where people are remote and they're not in contact with others, the government should cease the lockdown altogether. If you go to the Northern Cape, in much of the Northern Cape, you could scream and you're not going to find anybody. You could yell, there's no one around. So why can't you go out and do your normal business in a place like that? And when you have to congregate in villages or go to a tuck shop or a petrol station, then we have mechanisms in place. Here in the States, if you go to the stores, all the stores have made it so that you can't walk down certain aisles to do shopping in the grocery stores. You have to go one direction. And then when you get to the tills, they put X's. And then about 2 meters behind, there's another X, another X, another X. You can take these measures and expand them across the economy in creative fashions. Now, you can't really ask me to explain this for the entire South African economy. That's unfair. But there are people work in all these sectors and work in government departments and ministries that are responsible for these parts of the economy and local officials. And these things can be implemented. We have to do this. You have to do this. Not to mention all the people, I don't know what the current situation in South Africa is when it comes to elective surgery or surgery that's been delayed as a consequence. What if someone needs surgery? It has to be done. You can't do this indefinitely. And if the South African government doesn't address this, the ANC is going to look very bad. So I'm shocked that they're not lifting some components. Not to mention people addicted to alcohol and people who are not getting access to alcohol now. I'm not encouraging alcoholism, not encouraging the people who have an addiction to be able to continue their addiction, but you don't exactly have treatment centers for all the people who are addicted. And keeping people from alcohol may prevent domestic violence and criminal activity, but it also may promote it. And so there needs to be a smarter lockdown imposed here. We should be focusing on the sectors of society who are most vulnerable in South Africa, specifically people with immunocompromised systems like tuberculosis, HIV, people with cancer right now, things like that, the elderly. Those folks should be the focus, and that should be the people we're protecting and putting cordons around so that people who could infect them aren't coming near them. And if we do that, whether it's in the United States or we do that in South Africa, we can lift these lockdowns on other people so they can go about business, but still maintain social distance. Now, things like sporting events, sadly, and much to my consternation, are not something it's time or appropriate to do, in my view. I'm truly missing rugby. It really sucks not having rugby. And here in the United States, baseball season should have already started. Now we don't have baseball. And in this part of the country, we have lots of minor league baseball teams. Within 1 hour of where I live, I've got 4 professional minor league baseball teams that I typically go and watch. And now that I'm not serving every day, teaching at the War College, I have lots of time to do it, and I can't go to any games. But I'm not complaining about that. I understand the reasons for the restrictions. Things like that won't resume, but all the other things I talked about should resume. I think that answers the question a little bit. So what do you, working force boat, BE is a nightmare. Some of this is not directed to me, so I'm looking. So agree, BE is a nightmare. Yes, it is. It's also racist, and it's wrong. It's wrong. It does not accomplish what the ANC claims it's supposed to accomplish, to promote majority-owned businesses. It doesn't do that. Does it on some degree, but there's a lot of fraud. And it also discriminates against people who have nothing to do with historical past other than the pigmentation of their skin. You can't get any more racist than that. Just my view. All right. We should look at definitely open our export of wine. Yep. Not just wine. It was open for a little bit, and there was a shipment due to go out Friday, and the lockdown was reimposed, and that exemption was removed by Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and now we have the wine sitting around, not going anywhere, and markets that purchase it abroad not getting their supply when the boats are supposed to arrive, and they may not be inclined to buy it next time. So we'll see. POTUS, VP, Speaker of the House, Cabinet Joint. Okay, all right. So someone's answering the question. Nope, that's not it. At the time that my former boss was the speechwriter for General Bernard Rogers, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff ranked 34th in White House protocol. So when there was a function at the White House, a social function, you had 33 government officials, including the president, vice president, Speaker of the House, the chairman was 34. 34. Now, I tell that story not because I think it's right or wrong, but also I like to say that, in my view, is healthy. If the military ranks so far down in the order of precedence in government, that means civilian government must have a degree of control that's necessary for the military. And I think a healthy country, the military should not be running it. We should be serving the needs of the people at the direction of its elected officials. Now, sometimes we get boneheaded elected officials who take us places we shouldn't go and do things we prefer not to be doing, but that's not our call to make. The people, rightly or wrongly elected, the idiots or geniuses that we work for. So there you go, 34th. Softer lockdown will generate at least a few rands in sin tax. Yeah, and that's a problem. The South African government has no money. They burn through the coffers for a number of reasons. They can't borrow money, not unless they want to pay high interest rates, because their credit rating is junked by all the ratings agencies now. Moody's was the last to finally give in. So if they borrow money, it costs them a lot more because they have to pay far higher interest rates to convince people to give them money. So they can't borrow money. The ANC has said that they will not go to the IMF or the World Bank and ask for money because they don't want strings. Well, the IMF and the World Bank have said that in this crisis, they're not necessarily going to impose strings like structural adjustment policies that they have done in the past for normal times and normal loans. These are emergency situations, emergency loans. And so if they, in fact, are granting these things or granting debt relief, they've said they're not. I haven't seen any list of what the conditions are, but they say they're not going to attach these conditions. So if they're not going to attach conditions, then why can't the ANC go to the IMF and the World Bank and get these loans or get this debt relief that is made available to 19 countries in Africa? Well, I would argue to you that the problem here with this is that they don't want people to turn to them and say expropriation without compensation, national health insurance, Black economic empowerment. These are policies that must be adjusted, modified, or removed. They don't want any attention on that. They don't want any post-COVID-19 attention on it. They want the freedom and independence to do as they desire. And that's their call. But where are they going to get the money from? The African Development Bank? It's not going to provide the money, the African Development Bank. And beyond that, that leaves really the last lender of resort, Beijing. Beijing has its own problems. There's a lot of problems. People keep talking about how China is going to come out of this smell like a rose. I don't think so. A lot of people are angry at China. And aside from the anger, China has some serious economic problems because of their unfair trade policies and their little spat with President Trump. They were already suffering economically. Their growth had slowed dramatically because of their intransigence and Trump's hard line with them. So they had come to the table and made agreements with Trump, and it looked like things were going to improve for them. And then COVID-19 hit. People all over the world buy things from China. Many of those things aren't being bought today. So the Chinese aren't exporting things that they need to export to make money. And this is a problem for China. So China is not nearly in the great shape that people claim it is. So it may not have the resources to help bail out its friends in Harare and in Pretoria. We shall see. All right, let's see. Mentioning Endesi, did you hear she signed an amendment yesterday to stop cooked food from being sold? So it wasn't illegal, but now it is. Yeah, what is this? What is this nonsense? So you can't get takeout anymore? Is that what we're talking about, IC3ZA? Okay, so we have a lockdown here. It's not nearly as stringent as South Africa, but when I went out the other day to get some resources, buy some food and things like that, and pick up my post from the mail with surgical gloves, and left it in the garage for a couple of days, then read it. But when I did that the other day, as I drive past, I see lots of fast food, Wendy's, McDonald's, all these different places. Every one of them had long queues of cars in the drive-through line for takeaway. Not even walking the store. When I went to the grocery store, Giant, there's a pizza place that has food, and people were walking in, collecting it, takeaway. Keeping that sector of the economy going and also helping feed people. Why in the world would they stop this if people are taking precautions? It just doesn't make any sense. NDZ, where is her head? Where is her head? What does the NC think they're doing here? If they would tell us and they had some transparency to explain their decisions, it would make sense. Here in the United States, there's a backlash against government officials who are making outlandish decisions and posing restrictions, which in many cases civil liberties groups are saying they don't have the authority to do. And I'm not a lawyer, but I have read the Constitution, and I do question some of the actions many of these state governors and local officials have been taking. There's been a backlash, and now the media, who were opposed to Trump stopping travel from Japan in January and called him a xenophobe and a racist, and his political opponents accused him of overreaction by stopping travel from China. And then he had already formed a task force to deal with COVID-19, and he took other measures and started a lockdown. The media, who accused him of being slow and blamed him for the spread of the infection in the United States because he didn't act fast enough, now is going after people who are saying the same things that the media were saying in January and February when they were blowing off government advice on how to deal with this, and ignoring it, saying it's stupid, it's racist, it's bigoted, it's homophobic. Sorry, the standard line there. It is xenophobic to do this and attack Chinese when people weren't attacking Chinese. No one said, calling it the Wuhan virus doesn't mean Chinese are bad people. It just means that's where it was first observed. Wake up, stop the political correctness. So the media was attacking Trump for that back then. And now, when a lot of citizens are frustrated because, for instance, let me give you an example. In this county, 450,000 residents, 481 cases of COVID-19. Now, that's probably changed because since I've been on with the stream, the state is updated. But less than 500 cases out of 450,000 people. That's people who are confirmed with the virus, having had it or having it right now. 6 fatalities, 450,000 people. How many people in this county have died from some other cause in the same time frame? I don't know. I'm not trying to be morose. My point here is that a lot of people are frustrated. In many localities, Michigan, here in Harrisburg today, massive protests. Now, these people were violating the social distancing, so I'm not advocating what they were doing. They're standing right next to each other. But in other places like Oregon, people were protesting and maintaining social distance, and the media is painting them as neo-Nazis, racist, xenophobic, everything. Watch all this stuff. I watched some MSNBC coverage, and the coverage was horrific. I watched the video footage from the event, and then I watched what the media reported, and it's shameful because those clowns just 6 weeks ago were the ones saying what these people are demanding now. But the difference is these people are demanding in light of actual evidence, accumulation of information, data about the virus and about the spread of it and about the reaction to it and the impact of lockdown. They're reacting to that. 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, a month ago, the media was reacting to their bigotry and their hatred of Donald Trump in reporting the story instead of talking about the scientific facts. When other people followed the rules and obeyed them and listened to authorities and government officials who exceeded their authority in many cases and were compliant with it, not all of them, but many were, the media was telling us to do just the opposite. Now, when people are frustrated and they see scientific evidence that we're flattening this curve and we're coming out of this to some degree, that we should open things up, now the media is attacking those people as bigots, racists, and xenophobes. It's just ridiculous, and this is one reason why media is not trusted by many people. Takeout's already closed since the beginning. Oh, okay. Now you can't even buy cooked food at Woolworths. Oh, that's what the restriction was, or pick and pay. Yeah, I think the takeout or the takeaway was dumb. And it was dumb to let people buy cooked food in Woolworths, in Woolies, or Pick and Pay. So I would have done it the opposite way. I would have stopped the cooking in Woolies and Pick and Pay and would have allowed the takeaway to continue. That would have been my approach. So I disagree with what they've done. Can't buy a pie at a gas station. How is food not essential? Yeah, well, the problem is that they're simply just panicking and making decisions politically, not based on science, which is funny because if you get blamed if you're the center or right of center, you're accused of someone who doesn't believe in science by the media, which is just ridiculous. All right, so let's see. USA needs to invade Canada and South Africa needs to invade Zimbabwe. Well, Justa goes, I don't think you want Zimbabwe's problems. They are self-inflicted, created by ZANU-PF, and they are quite a mess. And as far as invading Canada, I don't know about that. We tried twice and we lost twice. During the American Revolution, smallpox kicked our butt at the gates of Quebec City. And again, when we invaded during the War of 1812, smallpox had an impact and we lost the battle and retreated back into the United States. So invading Canada, I'm not so sure that's something we want to do. We'd also, at a minimum, we have some confusion between First Nations and Native Americans. Which are you? For those who know the inside joke, we have First Nations communities in Canada, name given to Indigenous, although I don't know what Indigenous is. Humans all come from Africa, so we're not Indigenous anywhere except to Africa, assuming you believe in evolution. Anyway, so yeah, but the First Nations is a term applied to those groups who were there before Europeans arrived, and here in the United States, they use the term Native Americans. So anyway, I was born in this country, and my ancestors going back to the year 1621 were born in this country. So personally, I think of myself as a Native American, certainly a native-born American. But anyway, all right. So yeah, third time's a charm. I don't know about that, Just Gus. That's I don't know about that. Okay, folks. So I've gone for about another hour here before we got cut off. Any last comments or questions here? And then I'm going to wrap up. And I really want to thank you guys for being patient and jumping with me from stream 1 to stream 2 to stream 3 to stream 4. Yes, this is stream 5. This will be marked once I get a chance to edit it as part 5 of the stray voltage. So a lot of stray voltage here, and I do appreciate folks tuning in. So I'm really grateful. I enjoyed the stream. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you haven't, I apologize. If you have enjoyed it, I'm glad you have, and I look forward to you joining me again. So thanks a lot for tuning in. I don't see anybody asking any other questions here at this point. Any questions? I'll give it a couple more moments, and then I'm going to wrap up. But that was kind of a new approach to this. Not something I really intended on doing, but if there's interest, it is something I will do. This stray voltage, as I call it, basically just pick any topic. What was the ranking of the speechwriter? Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea what his ranking was. He never shared that with me. It was at the time Lieutenant Colonel Tim Lupfer. He was an instructor at West Point, and when he was at West Point, he wrote a influential book about. I think he wrote about the First World War. And about what's his name? This general, the Africa, Erwin Rommel. I think it was about him. Very interesting guy, very intelligent. He left the Army after the Gulf War and then went to work for an international paper, and he's still around. I'm connected to him on LinkedIn. I stay in touch with him periodically. All right, well, just to go said it was informative and fun. I agreed it was a lot of fun, and we'll do stray voltage again. I will have some scheduled streams coming up, even with just a few hundred subscribers. I've had several people approach me about appearing on the stream. So I'm going to be doing a stream with a gentleman who's a PhD candidate from Nigeria to talk about security in Nigeria during the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. There's a guy who runs an agricultural project in Ghana that I'm considering bringing on the program. And right now I'm looking at doing these like every Saturday, probably 10 a.m. here on the East Coast, and then it'd be 1600 in Johannesburg at 4 p.m. so that people could tune in both locations. I use Johannesburg because it covers most of Africa, 1 hour ahead of it, 1 hour behind it, and it covers Europe with 1 hour ahead of 1 hour behind it for the most part. There are some exceptions there, but anyway, so I usually say local time here and Johannesburg time. So, and then the third one is, I don't know his final rank when he got out of the military because I haven't been in touch with him a while, but I had a lieutenant colonel that worked with me in Liberia on security sector reform, Andy Hart, and he contacted me and asked if he could appear on the program because he followed my stream about the Armed Forces of Liberia after it had already streamed. He watched the repeat. So that's at least 3 speakers I have coming up. So these aren't lockdown speakers. These are just regularly scheduled things. And so it sounds like people want to do it and want to listen to these things. And so for those who don't know, I don't know if it shows up because I'm not sure, but I used to be a radio host, a disc jockey, and that was a long time ago. I did that as an undergraduate in university going about 40 years ago, well, 30 some years ago, almost 40 years ago. And then when I got out of the Army and went back to university, I was a disc jockey at a commercial radio station in which I did radio broadcasts for sporting events, and I did the news, and I played country music. Not a big fan, but I played country music on the radio. And I didn't make much money at it, but I got a lot of experience at it. And so I did interview people in the past, and I've appeared a lot in media, international media, television and radio. So what will happen is I'll turn these into sort of interviews. Some of these, because of my experience, I'll be contributing, so it'll be kind of a back and forth conversation. But I'm going to approach it from an interview standpoint. So I'll ask these people, I'll introduce them, I'll bring them on, I'll ask questions. You can ask questions in the stream. and we'll see how it goes. Right now, I'm still trying to fix my software. I can't get my software to let me show video. It says it's there, but it doesn't do it. It just plays the voice coming over the speakers. I think it's the laptop issue. Maybe a PC will work. But anyway, so I'm working on that. But I have at least 3 speakers lined up coming up in the coming weeks. Once every Saturday is the plan right now, and hopefully you'll enjoy those. But this stray voltage, I'll just do this at random, stray voltage, and see what happens. So awesome stream in total. Continue doing them. Excellent points all around. Great to spend a lockdown eve. Yep. Central Africa time +2. Speaking of Nigeria, did you hear about the attack that claimed 47 lives? If that's in the last couple of days, I did not hear about that. The most recent things I'd heard about is that the Nigerian and Chadian forces had attacked Boko Haram, and there have been a number of casualties in that. That was after Boko Haram had attacked a Chadian military base. Share the vid on Facebook, WhatsApp. Nicholas, I do share it on Facebook, not on WhatsApp, because I'm not sure how you do that on WhatsApp. But anyway, my email address is on the website, on the channel. When you go down, you click on it, it'll show you my email address. If you want to send me some advice or you have some ideas, please do it. Feel free to comment on the streams. Please give me a like. I do appreciate that. I'm going to play the fade out music here, if I can find it. Here we go. And I'm going to wrap up here. All right, there we go. So there's the fade out music. So we're about to go. Oh, within the last 24 hours, I definitely did not see that. So again, folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much for your patience and for sticking with me as we got to part 5 of stray voltage after the YouTube, whatever was going on here, cutting us off. Really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber and you enjoy the content, please reach right down in the bottom left-hand corner, push that subscribe button, and to the side, you can see that little bell icon. And for the bell icon, click on that. You'll get personalized notifications anytime I do a live stream. And my random thoughts live streams, I'm going to call them stray voltage. So that's what we're doing now. And if you have a comment, please feel free to put your comment on there at the bottom. If it's positive, that's great. If it's negative, that's fine. You're welcome to opinions. Discourse is what makes the world a special place. And so I welcome positive, negative feedback, not abusive feedback, but negative feedback is fine if you don't agree with something or you like it to go a different direction. And please give me a like down there. And those of you who stuck with me for 5 versions of this, I ask that you go back and give me a like on all 5 parts because you did watch it all. So please don't just like one because I'm not going to splice them together. I'm just going to put part 1 through 5 just for the sake of sanity here. So thanks a lot, folks, for tuning in. This has been Chris on Indaba, Africa. I really enjoyed the interaction today with subscribers, and I thank you for joining. And tune back in here next time. We'll talk about something else that's of interest in Africa, Southern Africa, South Africa, and the United States. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I wish you a very good day. Everybody take care.